There comes a moment when the person who acts like they do not need anyone begins to feel the weight of everything they have been trying to avoid. What if the person who seems the most distant is actually the one thinking about you the most when the world grows quiet? What if the one who pulled away is lying awake at night replaying every moment you shared together? That possibility changes the way we understand avoidant behavior. If you have ever loved someone who kept running from closeness, this perspective may feel very different from what you have heard before. Avoidant people are often misunderstood. Many assume they feel less deeply than everyone else, but the reality is often the opposite. They experience emotions intensely, yet they have spent years building an internal system that tells them emotions are dangerous. Depending on another person feels risky. Missing someone feels like weakness. Allowing themselves to need another human being feels like opening the door to inevitable pain. Over time, that belief becomes so familiar that it starts to feel like absolute truth. This pattern rarely appears without reason. It often begins early in life when love feels unpredictable or unsafe. Perhaps the people who were meant to provide comfort were inconsistent, offering affection one day and emotional distance the next. Maybe expressions of vulnerability were ignored, criticized, or dismissed. A child who repeatedly experiences those moments slowly adapts. The nervous system learns that needing others leads to disappointment, so independence becomes a form of protection. Eventually, they convince themselves that they no longer need anyone at all. As adults, they often appear confident, self-sufficient, and emotionally controlled. Yet the moment someone begins to matter, something old awakens inside them. Their nervous system sounds an alarm that has nothing to do with the present relationship and everything to do with the past. It quietly warns them that closeness leads to loss. The more emotionally important someone becomes, the stronger that alarm grows. Instead of moving closer, they instinctively create distance. They become quieter, busier, colder, or suddenly convinced that the relationship is moving too quickly. From the outside, it seems confusing. The person standing on the other side of that emotional wall naturally wonders what they did wrong. In many cases, they did nothing wrong at all. The wall was already there long before they arrived. It was built years earlier as protection against pain that had never fully healed. What happens afterward is something few people ever see. Once the distractions disappear and the day comes to an end, the avoidant person is finally left alone with themselves. The work is finished. The conversations stop. The television turns off. The silence begins. It is during these quiet hours that the emotions they spent all day avoiding slowly return. At first, those emotions rarely appear as obvious longing. Instead, they arrive as restlessness. They wander from room to room without knowing why. They pick up their phone only to put it back down. They open the refrigerator without feeling hungry. A quiet discomfort settles inside them, yet they cannot easily name it. Admitting what they feel would require acknowledging their vulnerability, so instead, they search for distractions. They scroll endlessly through social media, start another show, listen to another podcast, or fill every empty moment with noise. Sometimes those distractions work for a little while. Then something unexpected breaks through. A familiar song begins playing. A joke reminds them of something you once laughed about together. They read something and instinctively think about sending it to you before remembering the distance that now exists between you. For just a brief moment, before their emotional defenses return, they feel the pull toward you. That feeling is deeply unsettling because, to an avoidant person, longing is more than emotion. It feels like evidence that someone has gained the power to hurt them. Their instinct is not to move closer, but to regain a sense of control. Often they redirect their attention elsewhere. They may text a friend, respond to an old message, or casually browse dating apps without any genuine intention of forming a new connection. These behaviors are less about replacing someone and more about calming the discomfort of emotional vulnerability. They create the illusion of movement while avoiding the deeper feeling waiting beneath the surface. Yet even while distracting themselves, another part of their mind continues returning to you. It is not the loud, rational part that insists they are fine. It is the quieter part they rarely allow themselves to hear. That quieter part begins replaying memories. Interestingly, avoidant people often revisit the past rather than imagining the future. Thinking about a future together requires hope, and hope carries emotional risk. The past feels safer because it cannot change. So they return to small moments that quietly slipped through their emotional defenses. They remember your laughter during an ordinary conversation. They remember sitting together without feeling pressured to fill every silence. They remember a meaningful conversation that became deeper than they ever intended. They remember the way you looked at them when they briefly allowed themselves to feel understood. Those moments stay with them because they represent rare experiences of emotional safety. Another behavior often appears during these quiet nights. They check on you without reaching out. They look at your social media, watch your stories, or visit your profile without leaving any sign that they were there. Their goal is not necessarily to reconnect in that moment. It is simply to know you still exist within reach of their emotional world. Many avoidant people long for closeness without vulnerability. They want to feel connected while remaining protected from the possibility of rejection. They try to maintain emotional proximity from a distance that feels safe enough to avoid being hurt. They observe quietly while convincing themselves that their curiosity means nothing, even though their actions suggest otherwise. Eventually, however, silence becomes difficult to escape. Lying awake in the dark, they begin feeling emotions that remained hidden throughout the day. Longing mixes with fear, sadness blends with frustration. Alongside those emotions often comes another feeling that surprises many people: anger. Much of that anger is directed inward. Somewhere beneath their defenses, they recognize what happened. They know they pulled away from someone who genuinely mattered. They understand that the distance they created was driven more by fear than by wisdom. Part of them becomes deeply frustrated with the very defenses that once protected them. Still, recognizing the pattern does not instantly dissolve it. Years of emotional conditioning cannot be undone overnight. They remain caught between wanting connection and fearing it. They continue lying awake, carrying both the desire to reach out and the fear that reaching out would expose parts of themselves they have spent a lifetime trying to hide. For many avoidant people, this quiet struggle continues long after anyone else believes they have moved on. Their silence is not always proof that they feel nothing. Sometimes it reflects an internal conflict they have never learned how to resolve. They remain trapped in a painful cycle because they never learned how to be fully present in a relationship without keeping part of themselves protected. Rather than risking vulnerability, they stay alone with their emotions. In many ways, that is the very essence of avoidant behavior. They choose the familiar pain of isolation over the unfamiliar risk of genuine connection. It is a pattern they have been living with for years, long before you ever entered their life. If you are listening to this, there is probably someone in your life who behaves this way. You may have spent countless hours wondering how to reach them, searching for the perfect words, hoping that if you loved them enough, they would finally feel safe enough to let you in. That desire is completely understandable. When we truly care about someone, we naturally want to become the exception. We want to believe that our patience, understanding, and love will finally break through the walls they have built. Yet there is an important truth that is often difficult to accept. You cannot love someone out of avoidance. No amount of consistency, patience, or emotional understanding can heal attachment wounds they have not chosen to confront themselves. Avoidance is not a challenge that another person can solve through greater effort. It is a deeply rooted survival pattern stored within the nervous system, and lasting change can only happen when the individual becomes willing to recognize it and actively work through it. What you can do is understand what is truly happening beneath the surface. That understanding helps you stop interpreting their behavior as a reflection of your value. This may be the most important realization of all. Their avoidance is not a reflection of your worth, it is a reflection of their unresolved wounds. When they create distance, it does not automatically mean you are not enough. When they become emotionally cold, it does not erase the connection you shared. Even when they lie awake thinking about you but never reach out, it does not necessarily mean they do not care. It often means they are trapped inside a pattern that once protected them, but now leaves them feeling isolated. They have built an emotional prison and gradually convinced themselves that those walls are keeping them safe. The painful irony is that the people who need connection most deeply are often the ones least able to ask for it. Avoidant individuals are not naturally cold or incapable of love. Many simply learned very early that emotional closeness came with disappointment, inconsistency, or pain. The survival strategies that once helped them endure those experiences continue operating long after the original danger has disappeared. So the cycle repeats itself. They miss you during quiet moments but remain silent. They look at your social media without reaching out. They replay meaningful memories in their mind while convincing themselves to stay distant. They suppress the desire to reconnect, feel guilty for suppressing it, and then wake up the next morning wearing the same emotional armor they have relied upon for years. Outwardly, it seems as though nothing happened. Internally, the struggle continues. Understanding this pattern naturally leads to an important question. What should you actually do if you care about someone with avoidant tendencies? The first thing to recognize is that pressure rarely produces closeness. The more intensely an avoidant person feels pursued, the more likely their nervous system is to interpret that pursuit as danger rather than affection. Even sincere expressions of love can unintentionally activate old fears if they arrive with overwhelming emotional urgency. Their withdrawal is not always a rejection of you. It is often an automatic attempt to restore a sense of emotional safety. That does not mean you should play games or intentionally create distance to provoke a response. Healthy relationships are not built on manipulation. Instead, it means developing a life that remains meaningful regardless of another person's emotional availability. Your friendships, passions, goals, and personal growth should continue existing independently of whether someone is emotionally close or emotionally distant. This is not a strategy designed to make someone chase you. It is an act of emotional self-preservation. Without that balance, it becomes dangerously easy to lose yourself while trying to manage another person's emotional world. Love should never require you to abandon your own identity. Another important principle is that avoidant individuals usually respond better to steady consistency than to dramatic emotional moments. Grand declarations, intense confrontations, or repeated attempts to force emotional breakthroughs often activate the very defenses you hope to lower. Many avoidant people learned that emotionally intense experiences were followed by disappointment, conflict, or loss. As a result, their nervous system becomes cautious whenever emotions escalate quickly. What gradually builds trust is something much quieter: reliability, predictability, keeping your word, remaining emotionally steady, demonstrating through consistent actions that your care is genuine rather than temporary. An avoidant person may never openly acknowledge how meaningful that consistency feels, but it often leaves a deeper impression than dramatic gestures ever could. Your own emotional expression also matters. Avoidant individuals frequently struggle when conversations become highly charged with anger, panic, or repeated ultimatums. Their nervous system can become overwhelmed, causing them to withdraw further instead of becoming more emotionally available. This does not mean suppressing your feelings or pretending everything is fine. Your emotions deserve to be expressed honestly. The difference lies in how they are communicated. Calm, thoughtful conversations are often far easier for an avoidant person to receive than emotionally overwhelming exchanges. You can honestly say, "I miss you," without demanding an immediate solution. You can explain that something hurt you without turning it into a judgment about their entire character. You can express your needs while still creating space for dialogue instead of triggering defensiveness. Ultimately, healthy relationships require effort from both people. Understanding someone's attachment style can help explain their behavior, but it does not eliminate the need for mutual responsibility. Compassion is valuable, but it should never come at the cost of your own emotional well-being. The healthiest connection is one where both individuals are willing to grow, communicate honestly, and gradually replace old patterns of fear with trust. The content remains the same. What changes everything is the way it is delivered. Now, if you are on the other side of this, if you have stepped back from or walked away from an avoidant person, you may be wondering what they are feeling now. It is worth understanding what often happens after real distance enters the relationship. When you create genuine space, not as a strategy, but because you truly stop pursuing them, something often shifts inside an avoidant person. This can seem confusing until you understand how avoidant attachment works. Many avoidant individuals do not fully experience the depth of their emotions until they genuinely believe the relationship may be slipping away. While you were consistently available, their nervous system remained focused on self-protection. Their emotional walls stayed firmly in place because the relationship still felt within their control. But when you stopped reaching out first, became less available, or truly stepped back, their emotional system had to adjust. Suddenly, they were no longer protecting themselves from closeness. Instead, they were confronted by the absence of someone who genuinely mattered. That is often when the quiet replay begins to grow stronger. They find themselves thinking about shared memories more often. They may check your social media more frequently. Restlessness becomes harder to ignore because the emotions they spent so much time avoiding finally have room to surface. Even then, many still remain silent. That is one of the most difficult realities to understand. Feeling something deeply does not always mean someone knows how to express it. The fear of vulnerability may remain stronger than the desire to reconnect. Admitting, "I miss you," "I was wrong," or "I made a mistake" can feel overwhelming to someone whose nervous system has learned to equate emotional openness with danger. Some eventually reach a point where the longing becomes stronger than the fear. When that happens, their return is rarely dramatic. Instead of making grand declarations, they often reach out in subtle ways. They send a meme that reminds them of you. They mention an old memory. They casually ask about something unrelated. These messages often carry enough emotional distance to allow them to retreat if they feel rejected. To someone unfamiliar with avoidant attachment, those small gestures may seem insignificant. For an avoidant person, however, they often represent tremendous courage. Reaching out at all means they push through fears that have shaped much of their emotional life. How you respond in those moments can influence the direction of the relationship. If your response immediately returns to the same emotional intensity that existed before, they may quickly feel overwhelmed and retreat again. Their willingness to reconnect is often fragile at first. It benefits from patience, warmth, and emotional steadiness. You can welcome them back without overwhelming them. You can express happiness without making them responsible for your emotional security. You can leave the door open without rushing through it. Responding with calm confidence rather than emotional urgency creates a safer environment for genuine reconnection. Developing that balance requires practice. It means resisting the temptation to punish them for disappearing, while also avoiding the opposite extreme of immediately pretending everything is resolved. Healthy reconnection grows gradually through trust rather than emotional intensity. Stepping back for a broader perspective, it is important to remember that understanding avoidant behavior should never come at the expense of understanding your own needs. A question eventually becomes unavoidable. Is this relationship meeting enough of your emotional needs to justify the emotional cost? No relationship provides perfection. Every partnership requires patience and compromise, but there is an important difference between accepting ordinary imperfections and consistently living with emotional deprivation. Are you receiving enough warmth, consistency, emotional availability, and mutual effort to build a healthy future? Or are you gradually becoming emotionally exhausted while constantly explaining why your partner struggles to meet you halfway? Understanding another person's wounds does not require sacrificing your own well-being. Compassion and healthy boundaries can exist together. You can genuinely care about someone while also recognizing that the relationship, as it currently exists, is not enough for you. Choosing yourself does not erase your love for another person. Sometimes the wisest decision is to acknowledge both realities at once. You can understand someone's struggles while honestly admitting that their current capacity cannot provide the relationship you need. In some situations, one of the most loving things you can say is also one of the simplest. I understand why you protect yourself. I see your struggles. I care about you. But I also need consistency, emotional openness, and mutual effort. That statement is neither manipulation nor punishment. It is simply an honest expression of your own emotional reality. Interestingly, many avoidant individuals are deeply affected by that kind of communication. They are often accustomed to two extremes. Some people tolerate endless distance without expressing their needs. Others eventually explode with frustration after suppressing those needs for too long. Meeting someone who combines compassion with clear boundaries is different. It shows them that love does not require self-abandonment. It demonstrates that someone can care deeply while still respecting themselves. There is no guarantee that this will transform the relationship. Lasting change still depends on whether they choose to face their own attachment patterns. But this kind of honesty creates one of the healthiest opportunities for meaningful growth. Returning to where we began, the avoidant person lying awake at night, replaying conversations, checking your profile, feeling the pull toward you, suppressing that pull, and wrestling with emotions they cannot easily express often experiences far more internally than they reveal externally. They frequently feel more than they show. They miss more than they admit. They want more than they know how to ask for. At the same time, they remain deeply afraid of the vulnerability required to build lasting intimacy. Understanding that truth can be both painful and freeing, it reminds you that the connection was likely real. Their feelings may also be real, but genuine feelings alone are not enough to create a healthy relationship. A lasting relationship requires not only love, but emotional availability, communication, consistency, and mutual willingness to grow. Real emotions create the foundation. Healthy relationship patterns determine whether that foundation can become a lasting home. What you choose to do with that understanding is entirely your decision. The important thing is that you no longer have to confuse someone else's emotional struggles with your own worth. Sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is recognizing that you deserve both genuine love and the consistent actions that allow love to flourish.